the British state has actively encouraged the isolation and segregation and practices that led to the rape gang scandal. So the answer is not just to do the inquiry and to do all of that. The answer is to go back to what David Cameron and Angela Merkel said in 2010. Multiculturalism has failed. They said that 15 years ago. Okay, but yet we've not moved on to identify what the successor policy to multiculturalism should be. Now, I would argue you need to do two things in not just Britain, but the West. You need to you need to do three things. You need to dramatically reduce migration, reshape existing migration policy around nations that are culturally similar and compatible, including much stronger border security, which requires revisiting the post-1945 refugee legislative architecture. You need to go all the way back to basics and redo the laws that govern refugee and asylum in Western states and make it much harder for people to relocate into Western states. You secondly need a series of policies, a little bit like Denmark and to some extent Sweden are doing, which is not just a nod at integration by saying everybody should speak, the national language, but is essentially forced integration. We're not going to have segregated schooling. We're not going to have segregated housing developments. You are going to have obligations. You're not just going to have endless rights. You are going to have to be an active citizen. Yes, you're going to have to sign up to shared values. And yes, if you break our laws, there are going to be much more severe consequences than there are currently. You need to do that as well, because I don't think anybody in Britain anymore talks about integration. Keir Starmer in May 2025 said, we are at risk of becoming an island of strangers. And of course, everybody in the BBC, London liberal class, had a meltdown at the fact that the Prime Minister was suggesting nobody really knows anybody anymore. Well, to everybody who lives outside of the M25, the roundabout that surrounds London, that has been evident for the last 20 to 30 years. We have highly segregated communities, and we now actually have communalism within those communities where you have, for example, Hindus and Sikhs fighting with Muslims, and the British, the white British majority isn't even involved in some of those conflicts now. So you've got this kind of gradual descent into sectarianism, segregation, that the British establishment is sort of not even talking about and not even acknowledging. So we need to have a complete gear shift in dramatically lowering migration, investing in assimilation, and then starting to talk about how we are going to encourage people to have more children and support families. Now, that's the third part of that, because we're going to have to also tackle the demographic crisis that's bearing down on Western nations and start doing things like what Hungary and Poland are doing, even though so far the evidence of that is a bit mixed. But we need to be much more ambitious in how we're supporting Western families and encouraging people to have more children. Because if we don't do that, that's a longer term problem that is going to be used by the state to justify the continuation of the status quo.